Hello everyone, it's day 7 of the basic course. And sadly, it's also our last day, but we are going to finish off this course with a bang. So, I'm actually going to start off today by introducing you to the page patterns. So as you can see, we are making a mostly mosaic 2-page spread. So you may have seen our mosaic pages on our website or in the pattern gallery, and you're probably wondering how we do that. So we're going to be doing that today. So we actually do a process called, we refer to it anyway, as blending. And blending is when you cut up your photos. So today we're going to be doing that in the 1-inch squares, and then the end result is you kind of look like you have one large photo on your layout. Some people look at our layouts and think, they'll ask, how big did you print your photograph? And we'll say, no, that's multiple 4x6 photographs. So that's what we're going to be trying out today. So I think this will be a fun way to end our course as you get to learn how to create your own mosaic pages. Today I have 2 mostly mosaic page patterns together, but if you want to in the future, you can have just one layout be the mostly mosaic, and then the second layout can just be one with some mosaic elements. But I think as long as they both have mosaic elements to make them cohesive, it works. But since we're going to be doing the blending technique today, I wanted to make them both mostly mosaics. And of course, I chose both of these because they are both very heavily mosaics. On the left is pattern 227, and it has a symmetrical look, and the one on the right is 215. It kind of has a pinwheel look, so that's why I put them together. But also, both of them, as you can see, have these pink rectangle pieces that are both 2x3 squares in length. So if you look at the bottom of the pattern, or on the side if you're looking at your desktop, it shows you can look at it. It says set MM, which stands for the grid die. And it says 4, and the right pattern also says 4. And that lets you know that's how many photos you need to fill these patterns. So we're going to be cutting with this 8 times in total. So you need at least 8 photographs to fill in these spaces. Sometimes you may want to use more photos than that, but to make it easy today, I just want us to use 8 photographs. So I'm just pointing out here. So each section I divide the page in half, and basically it's 5x4 squares per section. So I'm going to use 4 horizontal photographs on the left side, and on the right side I have 2 spaces to fit 2 horizontal ones and also 2 vertical ones. The vertical ones have 6 squares in length. Hopefully it'll make sense while we're making it, but basically we want 2 vertical photographs, and the rest of them are going to be the horizontal way, just to make things easier, so you can kind of figure out how many photos you need, so you know each photograph can fill a total of 4x6 squares. And that's how you figure out, is looking at the space and seeing how can my photos fit into this space. And of course, the rest of the design spots, I have photos of people, so I would just use these spots to document the people you're with, or adding journaling, whatever you would like to use today. I'm just going to have my portrait photos there. I also have 2 sheets of grid paper, and I recommend, since we're doing a mosaic, choose a color that your mosaic photos will pop on. I also have cardstock for matting a couple of my photographs. I would keep it a simple color, basic color today, just because you want the mosaic to stand out. So I just have a dark brown grid paper and a light brown cardstock. And of course, you can tell we need sets A, B, and C, plus the grid die to complete our page today. Just a note, a lot of mosaics we do, not all of them, but a lot of them have been done on dark grid paper. I think the mosaic 1-inch squares pop out more. Today I'm using cocoa. You can also use black or navy. So if you're trying to find a color, I recommend a dark background, because that tends to be what they pop on. All right, so when you're planning your mosaic, so first you want to choose the larger parts, or your larger subjects, I guess we'll say. So there's that purple space, and then I have the blue square. So my larger subjects will go in those spaces. And then you want to make sure for our 2-page spread today that you get out the 2x3 die from set C and make sure you grab 6 photos that will be able to fill those spaces. You'll need 4 vertical ones and 2 horizontal ones. So first plan those out of what's going to go in the larger blocks. I also want to share some design tips for a mosaic page. You can place the photos wherever you want to today, but these are just some ideas. One design tip to keep in mind is look at the direction your subject's going. So if your subject's facing towards the right, you want it to be pointed towards within your layout, not away from your layout, right? So that rule still applies here. And also, you probably remember the rule of 3s, right? We put things in 3s or put things in a triangle. So that's what I'm doing here by color. So I had a few yellow flowers, so I decided to design it in 3s. So that's one thing you can do is put it by color in the triangular or by 3 design. Another thing you can do is I have a few flower photographs where, like these 3, they look really close up. So you can also design it by size. So most of your photographs could be the flowers are on the distant and look really small, and then you have a few of them that are really close up, and I would design that by the rule of 3 as well. On the top here, I have a couple photos where you can see the sky, and really all these photos are where someone was looking up. And I contrast that with the bottom where we were looking down. The pink flower kind of wasn't totally down. It's kind of in between, but I feel like that works because it's transitioning from the bottom of the grid paper to the top. So that's one idea to keep in mind is any photos where you can see the sky go on the top part of your layout, and anything, when you take photographs of flowers, you tend to point down, and so those ones can be at the bottom just to make it more like an interesting perspective. And if you want to, you can also do it where the bigger subjects are on the bottom. This works with flowers, by the way. The bigger flowers can be at the bottom, and then on the top of the grid paper, the smaller ones go up there to make it look like you took it in like one shot, because the closest flowers look bigger and the ones farther away look smaller, right? So I hope that makes sense. If you need to, please pause the video if you still need to plan out your page. I hope these design tips helped you with the placement. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting, but again, you are welcome to pause the video to give yourself some time to plan out where your photos are going to be placed. Just like we've been doing the other days, we are of course going to make the biggest blocks on our page patterns first, right? Oops, I dropped one of the dies. All right, so of course we're going to be cutting with the 4x6 square die from set B, which is the biggest die in the set. And for today, I recommend just using one color of cardstock. If you want to use pattern paper, I would make sure I use a simple pattern paper. And I chose brown, so I want the 2 focal points to get attention, and I think the matte will help separate it from the mosaic photos. So they'll pop, but I also don't want to take away a ton of attention from the mosaic parts. Sorry, I think my machine was acting a little weird, so I kind of cut through already, so I just decided to flip the paper over. But anyway, I would just pick a simple color that will help your focal points pop, but won't necessarily take away from your mosaic parts. So this, of course, will matte my 4x6 photo. And next, we're going to cut the square. That's the only square. So we're going to choose the 4x4 size from set A. And I'm also going to cut this with the same color cardstock as before. So I'm just, of course, using my scissors to cut around it. And then I'm going to place my die on the machine and then the paper on top. And of course, as usual, my die is placed at an angle, so it'll cut through the machine better. All right, so roll it through. So now I have the 4x4 sized mat. And I'm actually going to go ahead and cut the photograph. So I'm going to put this one away and grab the layering size, which is slightly smaller. And for this one, if you're using a 4x6 photo, you will want to use washi tape because that die goes right on the edge. All right, so I'm going to place it where I want it to be. I like this photo because they're looking out on the scenery and it kind of tells the story of the page on the page. So I like choosing photos that will tell a story in a way. So it's kind of like they're looking out at the garden, and then all around them on the page it'll be the different flowers from there. Kind of like this is what they saw on this trip. So I think that's part of the fun of scrapbooking, is telling a story. All right, so I got that one. And now we're going to be cutting with the 2x3 die in set C. So I'm going to show you here. So on our pattern, we have 2 spaces that are horizontal. So I'm going to be cutting 2 photographs that'll go in that direction first. So I have my die here. It's the 3x2 square die from set C. So get that out. And before, I forgot to use the crease pad on my photograph. So sometimes that happens. So remember, if you have the crease pad, to use that with your photos so you don't get those creased edges. All right, so I have my 2 photographs here that I decided worked with the horizontal direction. So I'm going to carefully put this on top. You are welcome to use washi tape if you need to. I'm pretty comfortable with using the dies, so I don't really feel a need for it as much. But if you're not quite there yet, that's fine. You can use washi tape to keep your die from shifting in the machine. All right, and I have this one. So yeah, the larger blocks, when you're doing a mostly mosaic spread, I do like to use the larger blocks, like I said before, for showing portraits of people, or this one, it has a person in it, but also shows a building. So you basically, in these design spots, you show the subjects that can't be made into a mosaic as easily. All right, so next we're going to be cutting 4 photographs in the vertical direction. Well, the photo doesn't have to be in the vertical direction, but they're going to be cut the vertical way, right? So I have this one. And by the way, we have done mosaics where we do cut up people and we do cut up buildings, but I consider that a more intermediate or advanced level. So that's why for today we're sticking with subjects such as flowers, and maybe you want to do something a little more advanced, and that's fine. But I think there's some extra tips to learn about those kind of subjects, so that's why I want to keep it easy today. But for a beginner, I suggest using the simple subjects for the mosaic parts, and then the more complex subjects, like with people, for the larger blocks. So after you've made a few mosaics on your own, then you can start getting into the more advanced subjects if you want more of a challenge. All right, this is the last photograph, at least I'm cutting, and as usual, you can always pause the video if you need to catch up. That's the nice thing about having a video, right? All right, now we're going to add these to our layout. All right, I have my pattern here for the left side of my layout, and I'm going to place this pink part down first because it's on the edge. So just now I counted 4 squares, and I know this rectangle goes on the 5th one. So it's easy to figure out that placement, and then I know the other rectangle goes on the opposite side. So when doing the counting, it's probably helpful to start with the blocks that are on the edges of the pattern. And this one I know is 3 squares down from the top. So I count the 2, and I know that block lines up on the 3rd line. So I hope that the counting trick helps you, because I know that a lot of you have a hard time figuring out where to place each element on the grid paper. Alright, of course, now I'm using my Re-positionable Glue to place down my photographs and my mat here. Alright, and as usual, take your time to line it up on the grid paper and make sure all those lines are covered. Alright, and of course, the space fits a whole 4x6 photograph. So I glued that down. I'm going to place it on top of it. And of course, I have a little bit of that gap here in the bottom, but this is a good spot to add a little bit of journaling, which I'll be doing after the video. If you do want the photograph to fill in this whole space, the only way you can achieve that is by printing a 5x7 photograph, and then of course you can use a layering die. And the only other way, if you're using a 4x6 photograph, to have an even margin is if you use double matting, which we learned a few days ago, right? Doing that multiple mat trick. Then you, obviously the photo would have to be cut a little bit smaller. But so those are, some people ask about that. How do I get the equal margin? And those are only ways, either printing the photo bigger or cropping it down smaller. Alright, so since the one photo is on the very bottom, I just know I need to count 4 squares over, and I know that the right bottom corner lines up in that right square. So that's how I figure out the placement. And the one next to it, I see it's only 2 squares up from the bottom, and of course there's only like one line of squares next to it on the right. So that's pretty simple to figure out that placement. Here, it's only 1 up from the bottom. And same thing, I'm going to count 4 squares over here, and I know that left corner of my photograph goes there. So the top part's a little bit easier. And then I count 2 squares over, and I know the bottom right corner of this photograph goes into that square. All right, and I know that my blue square, the 4x4 one, just goes right underneath this part here. So the square is a bit easier to figure out. I know before I showed the biggest pieces being placed down first, but it actually might be easier to place the little ones down if they're right on the edge. Of course, I just placed my photo on top, and I'm using my little chiseler here. Because of the die, it kind of has a rough edge to it, and so I'm just kind of smoothing it out with my little chiseler. And you're welcome to do the same. All right, I just gotta rub those pieces off. And now I'm gonna glue it down with my Re-positionable Glue. Just a reminder, the glue I'm using is the Herma dispenser, and it's great. We're pretty happy with that brand. All right, so now I have my larger pieces down, and now we're going to be cutting with the 1-inch grid die. Really quick here, this is the result, and this is how your page should look when you're all done. But all right, let's get started cutting the mosaics. So right now I'm just going to give you a refresher on this first photo on how to cut with the grid die. So you can probably see there's the metal blade parts. And you want your photo facing down, so the back should be facing towards you, and you're going to line it up on the inside of those blades. So don't put it on top like this. Put it inside, so they should be the inside part of the blade, not on top of the blade, just in this one corner, and I line it up along the top here and on the left side here. All right, and it may overlap on the bottom and on the other side, but that's okay. All right, so just take your time as you line it up within the blade, and then you want to put, when you're done, you're going to put your palm on the photo like I'm doing now, and make sure your washi tape is ready. I had to lift up because I would suggest ripping the washi tape you need up first, so now I have to recheck. All right, so now I can add my tape in one corner like this. And then I'm going to show you, I'm just going to put it on the opposite corner. right here. So now that's ready to go, and you can see how the photo looks with the grid over it. All right, now it's ready to be put into the machine. It's gonna lay it here. And again, I'm using the crease pad, so make sure you use that. The grid die probably gives the most creases out of the basic dies, so I definitely recommend the crease pad for the Mosaic grid die. All right, and you roll it through the machine. Of course, it makes a lot of crinky noises. All right, then you're gonna pull it off, and I usually just take the tape off, and it'll probably be in little pieces. So just take your time. And there's also, once you get the tape off, it's very likely that your photo is going to have some excess pieces like I'm pulling off here. I've never been able to get it to a perfect cut, but even if your square is a little bit shorter, I find it still looks fine once I put it on the grid paper. I haven't noticed a big enough difference where the squares look funny. But if they did cut really short by chance, you could just not use that side of the squares. It also may help to print double of the photos you're going to be cutting into Mosaic. And it did leave these little tabs just on the edges here, so I'm using scissors to cut those off really quick. The other side has them a little bit too, which they aren't too bad, but I'm going to cut them off anyway. All right, so we got our first photo, and of course you want to keep it together because we don't want to lose those pieces and get them scrambled on the table, right? So keep them together for now, and then when we are done cutting, we'll pull them apart before we get them on the grid paper. All right, now I'm going to clean up a little bit, and if you need to keep rewatching that refresher I did, you can rewind the video and watch that for whenever you need to look at it again. But for now, I'm just going to clean that off first. Anyway, I'm just going to leave the grid die on the crease pad here and just keep them going. All right, so I'm following the same rules as I just showed you before, so keep doing that. You may want to play some music because basically we're going to be cutting with the side. We did it once already, but we're going to be doing this 7 more times. So that's quite a bit of cutting to do. All right, so I'm rolling it through the machine. And of course the grid die, just like the other dies, I place in at an angle, and that is very helpful. So please keep that in mind when you're cutting. Put the die in at an angle. And just take your time to pull off the tape and the excess pieces off. Okay, just getting that off. And each time I have these tabs seem pretty bad on mine, but thankfully it's pretty quick to clip them off with scissors. So I got my second die down. And of course, if you need to, you can pause the video, or you could even skip to where I place it on the page if you just want to do this on your own without watching the video. That's fine with me. But I'm here. I'll still be here cutting. All right, so this one, and this is an option. I know I need it to be only 5 squares long, so you can you can have the die over the whole photo, or you could even shift it like I'm doing here if there's a certain portion of the photo you just want. But I'm just going to keep it on the entire photo. But if you need to, you can shift it over, but try to make sure you fill it up with enough squares that it'll cover the part you need. But that is an option, as I said. So if possible, the first time I was cutting with the grid die, I had the die on the table and then transferred it to the plate. But I actually like doing it this way better, where I have the die on the plate, so that way when you put the tape on, the tape actually it sticks to the crease pad or the plastic plate, whichever you're using. So it's kind of nice that it can just, see, I have it on the plate here, and that way it keeps the dye on really well, so it won't shift pretty much at all when you run it through the machine. So that's one tip I have for you if you haven't been doing that already. And if you need to, since we have to cut quite a few of these, you are welcome to play some music. I actually recommend it. I won't be playing any, but I think it's a little more fun when you're scrapbooking and crafting to have some music playing, something upbeat to keep you going. Or maybe you're with a friend and you're both doing it together and just chatting. What's nice about this course is it's right on the internet where many of you will be doing this. So even though you're not physically together, you're kind of doing this together as a Mosaic Moments community. So this piece is all done. I'm just gonna, again, cut the tabs off. As usual, I didn't have much there. So this one's done. We're moving on to the next one. And of course, each time I have a little bit of a mess on my crease pad here, but that's okay. It's easy to wipe it off. Of course, moving on to the next one. So one common question we do get when it comes to the grid die is some of you have photographs that are not a true 4x6 size. Unfortunately, some places the photo's a little bit smaller than that. So I'm going to explain a couple things here. And the first thing is, just so you are aware, and if you're interested, so at Mosaic Moments, we print the photos at our office. We use the Epson PictureMate printer, and we're happy with that. The Epson is a true 4x6 size. I don't know about other brands of printers, but I know the Epson is a true 4x6. And I actually think with the Mosaic Moments system, it's worth looking into and investing in your own at-home printer. Financially, per print, it's not cheaper than getting it somewhere else, but what's nice about it is we only really print the photos we actually need to make our pages. When we've printed from Costco or something, we'll have a whole batch of photos and then we may never use them. You may be different from us, but I just find with the at-home printer, I'm able to make my photos quickly, and you can also resize them. Some are pages we want to have our photos fit small spaces, so you can print it smaller than a 4x6. And some printers allow you to make them bigger if you wanted to make a 5x7 or even larger. So that's worth looking into. I think especially doing the system with the basic ones, it may not be a problem, but if you wanted to get into our specialty dies like the X Factor, for example, I think a home printer is worth looking into. And some of our pages, and maybe you've seen them, the photos are really tiny, like 1 by 1 inch, and you can maybe print a thumbnail somewhere else, but at home I can plug in, I want this to be a 1 by 1 inch size or the thumbnail size. And so, yeah, I think having a home printer is worth looking into, especially, like I said, with this Mosaic Moments system where you want to be really creative with your photographs and you may just want to make them a lot smaller. But if that is not an option for you, or if you're not interested in having your own home printer, you may be printing at places like Costco or Target or whatever local place you print your photos. And the problem is a lot of places, they're not a full 4x6, right? So a lot of people ask, well, what do I do? Because it won't be the true size when I put it on the die, and some of them won't be a full 1 by 1 inch, right? Basically what I tell people is you may just want to see how it looks on the grid paper, because as I've shown here, even here where I have a full true 4x6, when I use the grid die, it doesn't cut it perfectly, and sometimes I get a little sliver off. But when I put it on the grid paper, it still looks fine. It doesn't look like a significant difference that some of them look obviously shorter than the others. So you may want to see maybe your photo, even though it's a little bit shorter, it might be fine. So I would look at it on the grid paper and say, is it a significant enough difference that I can tell it's shorter than the other ones? So that's one thing you can do, is just check to see if it even looks bad. If it does look bad and it bugs you, the only other thing you can really do is just not use that shorter part. So basically, you would use the die, you would put your photograph on the die, just like we're doing here, and the part that seems a little bit shorter, you will just remove it and not use that part. Which today, with the exception of the two vertical photographs, they will need the full 6 inches, but the ones that are horizontal, they only need to be 5 squares in length. So on those ones, you can just eliminate one side that is a little bit shorter. But if you have any more questions about it or concerns about the photographs you're using or any questions about the grid die itself, please let me know in the comments below. And I or someone else on the Mosaic Moments team will answer it as soon as we can. But if you are really struggling with using the grid die with your photographs, other options are... So really quick, because I pulled the tape off, my 1-inch square came off. So I'm going to try to keep track of that more carefully. Anyway, so if you are just still struggling with the grid die and your photo size, another option that you may want to do is print your photos to 5x7, which probably isn't ideal because that does cost a little more, but sometimes that's what you have to do, right? So if you're still really struggling, you can cut it into 5x7, and there's also the option of hand cutting 1-inch squares, which some of you are like, I don't want to hand cut, but it actually is really not too hard to cut it with the mat knife and ruler. We do have videos about hand cutting on our YouTube channel. So if you're doing this and you're still struggling, there are other options for you. And again, you can comment on YouTube or contact us if you have more questions or concerns about it. But hopefully, since you're following along with me, you're not struggling with the grid die. So hopefully it's been going smoothly for you. It can be tricky at first, but over time you'll probably see that it'll be easier and easier for you to use. All right, so this photograph, I'm almost done getting these extra pieces off, and then I only have one more to go. All right, so cutting the tabs off, and again, my photo fell off because when I took the tape off, it took the square with it. But that's okay. At least it was just the one square, so that's easier to keep track of that than if the whole thing fell apart or something. All right, so I'm going to clean this up, and we got one more. We can do it. I hope you're with me or caught up with me. If not, like I said, you can always pause the video if you need to, or rewind. That's the nice thing about having a video class. All right, so here's the last one. Putting it on my grid die carefully and putting the tape in the corner. And I do like how it attaches to the crease pad, so my die is really still, won't move. Whoops. And thankfully, if that happens, it won't be crooked because I had to roll it through the machine twice. All right, so now that's done. So I'm going to get my tape off, which if you're like me, yours probably cut into multiple pieces. Okay, I'm getting these excess parts off. Yeah, I don't think there's any way to make a perfect cut unless you use the larger photo, but as I said, it doesn't seem to make too much of a difference, so I'm going with it. Of course, I'm taking the tabs off with my scissors, and it's done. We got the last one done. So now we get to do the fun part of making the mosaic. Let's get going. All right, so hopefully before we ever started cutting, you planned or made a plan on where your photos were going to go. So now we just need to glue them, right? So I'm using my Re-positionable Glue, which is good because sometimes the squares are crooked and you need to reposition them, and sometimes you change your mind, which I'll actually be showing why that might be the case in a little while. But anyway, so it's only 5 squares long, so I just am taking off the edge I don't want. And of course, the nice thing about having all the squares together, which they are like that intentionally, is because it's easier to glue the back of them. And again, they don't get lost as easily. All right, so this top section, the first 2 rows, we only need 3 squares, but I still keep everything lined up. And I'm actually going to keep the squares I'm not using because when you're blending, you may never know when you need it. And we'll see that in a little bit. So keep those squares you don't use. I say keep them until you're completely done with your mosaic because you just never know. You may decide to use it. And again, I'm keeping everything lined up. So here I'm just lining up the squares exactly how they were before the photograph was cut. Of course, these last 2 rows are going to use up the rest of my squares. All right, now I would put the bottom row on, and of course, take your time when putting on these squares, and in the end, when you're all done, you can take a quick look at your page to make sure nothing is crooked. All right, so we got that section done. Did you think that your one photograph was going to fill up the whole section? Some people look at our pages and they're like, my photo couldn't fit in that space like here. Some people might look at that and say, how could a 4x6 photograph fit that space? But it totally can. It's your eye is tricking you because it has those gaps in between each square. So it's making your photo appear like it's bigger. I'm just getting rid of this side here. So, quick side thing. I dropped one of my squares on my photo, and now it has a little glue dot. So I actually have this handy tool. This is called the Xyron Adhesive Eraser. I think it's available on Amazon and maybe some other scrapbooking type sites, but if you accidentally get one of those glue dots on your photographs, you can erase it in a sense. And shout out to Kathy. She commented on the basic day 1 video and told us about it. And so that's been a handy tool to use. All right, so moving on. So as I was talking about before, like this photo here, this was made with a 4x6 photograph, but at first you think, oh, it's not going to fill in that space. It's not big enough. But the grid, because of the gaps in between all these squares, it makes it seem like the photo's bigger than it actually is. So just keep in your mind that your eye is tricking you into thinking it's a bigger photograph when it's actually not. And that's kind of part of the magic of mosaic moments. Or one of the things, right? And these mosaics are just so neat. We have a lot of different dyes, but these basics, they really just take me back to the roots of what we originally did a lot. Originally, we mainly did these 1-inch square mosaics, and they never cease to amaze people or amaze myself. It's just amazing after I make one. they always look really good when you're done. So, especially with this technique. All right, so I kept these extra photographs because I think I could add a little bit more to make it look more blended together. So take some pieces you think might look like good transitional pieces between your two photographs. Like here, I kind of took photographs, and I think it kind of looks more now like it's one photograph on the bottom here. It looks blended. Hence why we call it blending, because it was two photographs, two totally different ones, and then because we cut it in the 1-inch squares, we blended them together and they look like one big photograph. It looks really good, and obviously if you looked really close at it, you would see it was two separate photographs, right? But because of the 1-inch squares, it makes an illusion as if it was one photograph. See? It's magic. So I'm going to keep doing that with the rest of the spaces too. What's nice about using the page patterns is, so we have the 3 bigger blocks, so you don't have to blend the rest of it because it's being separated, right, with the bigger blocks. But once you were going into the more advanced techniques, you might want to blend the entire thing in the 1-inch squares, and then, then you're going to have to place everything with intention. But right now we have these separators. The bigger blocks are separators, so you don't have to blend every element because of that, which I think is a good thing for those of you who are beginning with this. All right, of course, moving on with the next photograph, and this time the top 2 rows are going to fill in these 2 lines with 5 squares each, so there's 10 squares altogether. Again, just take your time as you do this. All right, next I'm going to remove that right section because it doesn't line up with what else I need to fill. So yeah, generally with most mosaics, I line everything up as best I can, and obviously on the bottom I removed a couple pieces, but that's just to make it look blended together. But for the most part, I would try to keep everything aligned the way it is in the photograph. There's some exceptions, and sometimes you need to rearrange things, but we still want it to look cohesive in the end. All right, got the next one here, and I'm removing this side because it's just green. Nothing exciting's going on that side, but they could make some good blending pieces, so I'll keep a few of them. And I know my paper is getting filled up with all these. I may need to grab another sheet eventually. Of course, you line it up. And of course, if your photographs are not blending perfectly today, that is fine. It's your first one, and they don't have to be perfectly blended. They still look really good, and they still look neat. So don't feel like it has to be a perfect looking blend. And like I said, if you really looked closely at a lot of our mosaics, you would see that anyway, but it's just the initial like, oh my gosh, like how did you get that look? So yeah, so make it easy on yourself today. I'm just here to give you my tips, and you can follow them exactly how I'm doing it, but the important thing is that you're happy with your page. So you do what you feel in your gut feels good. That's what I sometimes tell people. It's just kind of like use your gut if you're not really sure of what you think of it. All right, I'm just going to play around here. And this is actually part of the fun of making a mosaic with these blending pieces. It's kind of fun. I think it's kind of therapeutic to sit here and be like, oh, this might look good. I don't know. It's actually kind of relaxing for me anyway, in a way. So I think I'm going to switch out one more of the pieces. So as you can see, it doesn't have to be this like straight line between the two different photographs you use. You can have them blend in all kinds of ways, whatever looks the best to you. All right, so I'm pretty happy with the left side of my layout, and you can always pause the video if you're still working on that side. If so, do that now. But we are going to start on the right side of the layout now. My paper is getting pretty filled up there with all those extra pieces, but I'm keeping them just in case. You can throw them out when we're done, or you can throw them out now if you don't need them. So, all right, so I'm going to glue the next photograph. Pretty exciting. All right, so this is the vertical one, so of course it's gonna, this one anyway, I'm gonna place on that bottom right area. So I eliminated the part I don't really feel like there's anything that interesting going on there, so I like these pink flowers. That's why I like flowers. They make great mosaics, and there's so many varieties, and they add so much color. Flowers are a great subject. So wherever you go, even if your page won't be like a floral page, it's always nice to take pictures of flowers. You just never know when you might turn them into a mosaic layout. So I'm going to take the next one on, put the next one on, and of course this one I'm only going to put the top 2 squares, and then I'm going to eliminate 3 of them because the section's being taken over by a photo, and now I'm going to put on just the bottom square. So really on these last 2 rows you need the top 2 squares and the very bottom square. So keep that in mind when you're planning it out too. You want to make sure that your subject frames, like here I made sure the flowers actually framed the little photograph that it goes around. So I went ahead and got another piece of cardstock because as you can see the other one's getting filled up with my 1-inch squares, but I'm leaving it on that paper so they're not just sticking to the table or on my scrapbook page. Alrighty, so I'm just deciding which part to eliminate. Guess this side. Sometimes it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to keep these squares again. Because you never know. Well, never mind. I'll just throw them out. I decided I probably won't need them because these flowers are just so bright yellow. They probably wouldn't blend anywhere anyway. So, all right. Of course, this area will fit a horizontal photograph. So this area, if you look at it, it's 4 squares by 5 squares long. So I know I can fit a horizontal photo that way. And where the pink flowers are, I know it fit a 6 by 3 square space. So I knew I could fit a vertical one there. Once you do this on your own, you may not have to follow those rules exactly, but today I wanted to make it easier by showing you what can fit where and make it as little photographs as possible. But once you keep doing this, you may even want to add more photographs than what we're doing today if you want to do even more blending. So it's something to try. Like I said, I think mosaics are just, they're really fun to make. All right, so I'm adding this last one, and I don't really think I need to do too much blending. Both photographs have a lot of green. I think there might be one I'll switch out here. I don't know if it makes too much of a difference, but anyway, so it kind of transitions well. I'm going to try out this another one. All right, I think I'm going to keep that. So, obviously some photographs just kind of naturally transition pretty well without having to fix the blending. All right, so I'm going to fill in this other vertical space, and this is one of the photos where it got chopped off, or when I took the tape off the back, it came off. I'm just deciding what part to eliminate. All right, I'll just get rid of this side. I kind of liked how the opposite end that I'm using, it kind of is blurry. So I think that makes a good transition when it's kind of a blurry edge. Right, and of course I have the 3, and then sorry, right now I just realized I had it on the 5th one and not the 6th square down. So again, why repositionable glue is handy is because sometimes you didn't get it to the right spot. So okay, I'm gonna put these here, and of course I'm gonna grab this line here. All right, take your time as you put it on and make sure everything is aligned. This one I'm just gluing now since it came off. Okay, I have these last 2 pieces to put on. So that one's done. Oh, all right, if that happens, that means you need extra glue on it. So that one didn't get quite the amount of glue it needed. So that's why that happened. Sometimes I don't roll. I recommend when you're rolling the glue on the back to go right from the edge to the other edge, actually getting a little bit on the cardstock if you're using, which I recommend using cardstock instead of just rolling it on the table, or else you'll get that sticky glue on your table. So this time, again, when you glue it, make sure it goes right from one edge to the other edge of your photograph. So that'll help it stay placed on your grid paper much better. And yeah, see, look, this photograph with the blue flowers on top, that is it's not very transitional looking. It's very obvious contrast right there. But like I said, if your mosaic looks that way, that's perfectly fine. We have plenty of mosaics where there's not an obvious, or there's not a transition between the two. It is obvious that they are very different photographs. So this look is okay as well. I am going to be probably doing a little bit of blending work because that's my goal for this page. But as I said, that doesn't have to be for you if you don't want to do that today. All right, I got these last 3 pieces. I can't believe this. We're almost done with our mosaic. All right, I got the last one down. And since it is quite a contrast between those 2 photographs, I think I'm going to play around and see if I can get them a little more blended here. I'm going to remove that bottom one because it was all just green. So that way I can have the 2 greens sit by each other. And yeah, because I have the repositionable glue on the back, it's easy to just move them around. So that is a really big reason for buying that repositionable glue, is for these mosaic parts. Okay, I think I'm going to get a different one. I wanted one that maybe wasn't quite as sharp looking. It has some blue on it, and I don't want blue on this part. I want it to be more green. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. I really like how those blue flowers wrap around that photo. Doesn't that look wonderful? I hope you like how yours look. I really like that look, how the mosaics are wrapping around the other photographs. It's very pretty to me. All right, so I'm all done with my mosaic. And if you're not, you're totally welcome to pause the video. But if you are, congratulations! You just completed your first mosaic, assuming this is your first time, and we have completed the basic course! So yes, you can give yourself a big cheer. We made it through the course, and after all that, I hope you're much more confident with the basic dies. They really are an amazing tool for making beautiful scrapbook pages, whether you want to make it simple or create amazing mosaics like we did today. So let me know below in the comments, was the mosaic as fun as you thought it would be, or was it easier or harder than you thought? Let me know what you think. And do you plan to do this again? Because I hope so. Alright, of course, since this is a video series, you are always welcome to come back and redo the whole thing again if you need a refresher or just want to make 7 pages really quickly, and maybe there's some tips you missed along the way that you can relearn. Alright, I'm so happy I did this course for you guys, and I really hope that again, that you're more confident with the Mosaic Moments scrapbook system, and that you'll be able to do this on your own and most of all, have a lot of fun doing this and enjoy creating amazing pages. Anyway, there are many videos on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe if you haven't already to see many demos and tutorials to come. And happy scrapping! Also, thank you so much for joining me for this basic course.